Hello and welcome to citiesabc.com video podcast. My name is Dinis Guarda and I'm here to talk about biggest challenge we face among citizens, and as well how can we actually have a more positive vision of the world that is based on ideas, technology, and as well positive ways of looking at the solutions and the challenges we've been facing. So my video podcast Dinis Guarda and the context of the citiesabc.com platform has been growing quite significant. We are at the moment in almost 60 interviews with global leaders and thought leaders. And as well been profiling people that have been actually changing the world in a lot of different areas, both from building software or building books or reading or actually writing material research that actually can come up with the interesting solutions, and especially creating new narratives or new perceptions that actually can make us think bigger and out of the box. But as well looking at, especially during this COVID-19 pandemic that is kind of creating one of the biggest disruption in the last 100, 200 years, how can we reinvent our cities, our countries, our universities, our organizations, and as well our companies and our business. Citiesabc.com was created recently as a platform precisely for doing a bit of all of that. It's a mix of software, wiki, and thought leadership, and we aim to be a very large platform on this. Today we have with us someone that I kind of been wanted to interview for a long time, but as well someone I respect a lot. That is a global personality coming at this stage from Buenos Aires, Argentina, a beautiful location, the Paris of Latin America. And so Diego Gutierrez Zaldivar, that is a global personality on the blockchain and crypto technology world, is a pioneer in web and internet technologies, and has been building big platforms and projects in Argentina and Latin America since 1995. So he was one of the inception personalities. Diego is also one of the first personalities to foster and develop Bitcoin and all the crypto areas in the blockchain technology in Latin America, which he has done since 2012, so immediately as Bitcoin was created. In addition to some of his companies and entrepreneurial successes, he is the founder of RSK Labs, and he also has co-founded Koibanx, and another blockchain company that is aiming to transform the potential of Bitcoin and blockchain technologies into real use cases, and as well as behind the IOVlabs, that is as well another platform that I want to talk as well. So Diego, welcome to our podcast. It's an honor and privilege to have you here.
No, my pleasure, Dinis, and thank you for inviting me. And congratulations for all the success you're having with the platform in such a short time. No, it's amazing.
No, it's all about people and connecting people, and as well we're trying to make this really truly global. So today I want to talk about your fantastic wealth of knowledge, but as well the entrepreneurial spirit, and as well about Latin America, which I love, which is kind of, I think, one of the first interviews about Latin America. We had actually an interview with Daniel Duarte, which is another personality of blockchain and especially crypto in Brazil. Is actually probably one of the equivalents to you, but more on the trading side, not so much entrepreneurial. But it's interesting to see. And Argentina is a massive powerhouse in the blockchain area. So Diego, I want to start with a bit of introduction about you, and I think this is particularly important because we are profiling people from all over the world, but it's very different from being born in Europe or in Africa, and especially in Argentina, which we were talking before, was at a certain point the seventh wealthiest country in the world, and at the moment has been going for a lot of challenges. So a bit of your background and your education, and how do you start from becoming the Diego that you are today?
Well, my background is interesting in the sense that there are two things that were always present in my life, and one was technology. I started programming when I was 11. I'm an autodidact, so everything I learn by myself. I did a couple, like, the Cisco trainings on certain technical specifics, but everything I learned by myself. And the other track that was always present is, like, at 9 years, I started going to the slums in Buenos Aires and doing social work with my mother. So And I continued to do so by myself until my early 20s. So for me, social transformation was another thing that was very present in my life. Um, and when I got in touch with the web in the early days, in 1994 was when I read my first like Wire magazine,
Yeah,
and then
the first
yeah,
website was created by them, or at least one of the first ones.
yes, one of the first, and then I started reading about the digital divide from Negroponte and all the MIT Media Lab, ideas that were thriving back then, and then I realized the internet was going to be able to put my two passions together, no? Technology and social transformation under one roof. So I started working. I helped create the website for the main newspaper in Argentina. That was huge. That's an industry that is in a big challenge today. But back then they had 1 million subscribers on Sundays, for example. So they were receiving the newspaper every Sunday. And the first reactions I got from people like all over the world saying, you don't know how it changed my life to be able to understand what's going on in Argentina in real time. Because before that, they had to wait 24 hours, 48 hours to get the international version of the newspaper. So that was like the first like aha moment of the web, of the internet. And well, after that, since 1995 until the boom and bust of the internet, of the dot-com era, I went through all the process. I helped do an IPO in NASDAQ of one of the biggest portals, information portals in Latin America. So I really lived the whole explosion. And also, we were very, in a way, idealistic in the way we thought. We had a lot of dreams about the internet, and although not all those dreams came through, it ended up transforming society for good and changing the whole landscape and making so that gave me like a very strong first experience, like first of the hopes I had and how they realized maybe later, maybe 10 years later. Then it made me understand that these technological transformations have concurrent phenomenon, and you cannot like you cannot expect one thing to do the change. It's more like the interconnection of multiple technological revolutions that are transforming society. Now I know that there's the Schumpeter, this economist that in the early 20th century was talking about these revolutions, and in our days we have Carlota Perez, which I like a lot, that also speaks about how innovation is the driver of social transformation. Back then I didn't knew that. I just was feeling the wave and riding it as I could. So when in 2012 I got in touch with Bitcoin 1 year before in 2011, but I didn't get it. To be honest, it's like I thought it was a nice experiment, that I didn't saw the full potential. And in 2012, a friend of mine brought me back to it, and once I feel it, I read about it, and I realized that was the next like wave of transformation that was not only touching information access or opinion. That was what the web did in the early days, or still doing, but also it was going to transform how the financial aspects of human kind were going to work. And then I decided to drop. I had a software factory back then. I was helping young entrepreneurs build their solutions and mentoring them. And I say, okay, I need to be part of this new movement. And that's why I started creating communities in Argentina, in Latin America, like traveling to some countries, helping other leaders in the region, like build communities. And so that was like kind of my early days until I got to Bitcoin blockchain, and finally like went back to my dreams of social transformation using technology, but now with new elements that were missing in the first wave. No? Now I understood that the missing part in my early days was the economic part. it was impossible to do a revolution using the centralized or traditional financial systems we had back in the 2000s or in the early days of the web. But combining both, you can have like a truly transformative platform to solve the financial inclusion and the problems that I was trying to find since my early days, to solve since my early days. No?
That's quite impressive, and I love that you, both as a self-made person as well as self-taught, you became one of the global leaders in these areas of technology, but as well your focus on social impact. And I know that Argentina is a very complex country, and I would like to touch that before we go to your career, because it's complex because in one end is a very cultural wealth country, because you have from I don't know, from a lot of fantastic writers to even a pope and a lot of other things. And I love specifically the Argentinian literature. But I think it's this wealthy of intellectual has somehow failed the rest of the country in a lot of different areas. I would like to hear your vision on that. How do you see that, especially your generation, because you are quite successful worldwide, but the country is still going for a lot of challenges. And I know that especially there's a huge receptivity to blockchain and crypto in Argentina, precisely partly because of the challenge that the economy is still facing. But as well, I would like to ask you, why do you think this challenge that a country that was the seventh wealthiest country in the world became one of the countries that has been more bailout in history, at least in the last 50 years? So just a bit going on that economical, social impact. And I know that it's been having a massive impact on people. So people are actually quite educated, but probably on the entrepreneurial part and the success is quite a big challenging to be a young person. And as well, for the last generations, I think probably the last 3 generations has been kind of crazy. So I would like to hear your views on that.
Well, it's like, Argentina is so complex, and I think, the same reasons, it's so diverse that I don't think we have like a shared. We are always fluctuating in a pendulum from the, more individualistic mindset to the collectivism, but not in a really positive way. No, it's like so as a society, we have that dichotomy, that permanent dichotomy, where you have one government that is favoring the market regardless of the individual impact, and then in succession you have a government that is favoring the collective or the without caring about entrepreneurship or development. So you have this dichotomy that doesn't allow the country to actually move forward. But I don't know the reasons why. I can explain what we live more than why that's going on. On the other side, you have a society that, unlike any other place in Latin America, has like a huge middle class and an educated middle class. It's like, since the late 19th century, early 20th century, we had like primary and secondary or high school education free and available for everybody. Then, later in the, the higher education also was made free and available for everybody. So that enabled mobility of classes that were impossible in other countries. It's like, there was this saying that my son, the doctor, was like this dream of like lower class population of seeing a mother from the lower class population or the more vulnerable parts of the society being able to nurture his kid and provide the minimum things needed so he could become a doctor and aspire to a better life. And that in Argentina was possible. So you have like, a social network of contention that enables a lot of amazing things, but also, you have a lot of rules and bureaucratic structures that kill entrepreneurship. Like being an entrepreneur in Argentina is like, it's like, I don't know, being thrown in the jungle to survive with a stick in your hand. No, it's like, and that also fosters creativity. So like it's also two-sided. It's like we have that permanent dichotomy. It's like, entrepreneurs in Argentina, when they go outside, they are extremely successful because they have been thriving in extremely adversarial environments forever. So where you have taxing models that are completely anti-entrepreneurship, that are extremely complex and bureaucratic. Opening a new company, registering a new company in Argentina can take months, like 3 to 6 months. You need to have a lot of professionals helping you out to do that. You cannot do your tax reports by yourself. You need to have an account. It's so the whole environment is so difficult that if you thrive and you manage to or not thrive, but if you manage to survive in that environment, then you go anywhere else and you thrive. So it's interesting that we have people with high education that are very creative, that are anti-fragile, and they can find ways of surviving in very harsh environments. But we don't have the conditions to really seize or use that value for our society. That's why the successful entrepreneurs in Argentina or Argentinian entrepreneurs always succeed somewhere else. No, you have Mercado Libre, that is one of the top companies in the world in terms of market cap. That it was born out of Argentina, but succeeded going to the whole Latin America. Could not succeed in Argentina. Indeed, in Argentina, it's been always challenged and attacked somehow. So I think that, and on top of that, you have macroeconomic cycles that are devastating as well. So it's not only the bureaucracy, this shifting of mindsets between one government and the following, but also you have macroeconomics where you have a crisis, like a deep crisis every 10 years. So for different reasons, no? But we had the first bail-ins in 2001 that were before the Cyprus situation. We were the first ones to do this, saving the banks, and before 2008 as well, saving the banks, from a collapse. They produce themselves by investing in risky assets without any understanding. So, and the whole funds of the population were locked, in the banks for a year and then depreciated to 1/4 of its value. So that was a very traumatic situation for the whole society. That's why people in Argentina is always looking for ways of hedge against the macroeconomic decisions that the government do. That's why Argentina has a dual economy. Everybody in Argentina lives day by day in pesos, but they save in dollars or any other assets, because they are always with this mindset, how the government is going to, attack my wealth, so people is always looking of ways to protecting, and things that in other contexts are not a good investment are a good investment in Argentina. For example, in big high inflationary moments, the merchants keep the goods in stock, because preserving stock in goods is better than having the cash and having a fast turnover. So that is, that in a way, displays a lot of natural economic models corrupt, the logical way of doing business. Same thing, people, for example, buy cars in installments because the car will keep value longer than the money. All sorts of distortions happen. But at the same time, we have a society that is very technology friendly. So that's why, Argentina was one of the first societies to have cable TV, internet, social networks, that in Latin America, it was one of the first to drive the adoption in those things. And the same happened with cryptocurrencies, which is the exact intersection of technology and money, and finance. So it makes sense that we have one of the biggest cryptocurrency communities in the world.
So I think from your background, so of course there's this interaction with a very complex ecosystem, especially for being an entrepreneur and as well a person of action like you. And so you start initially the first wave of the internet inception, where we actually, like you mentioned, you build the first website for one of the main newspapers in the country, but as well you start very fast in adoption. Well, 2012 was mostly when people start hearing about Bitcoin. The first year was just probably for the people putting the white paper and some of the the guys. So can you tell us a bit about that experience of building, first of all, the websites for big economical groups, and as well being one of the first people in the internet, and then being the second wave of the internet of trusted blockchain and crypto?
Well, for me, I was very young, no, when I did the first when I was part of the team. It was a small team. Initially, we were 3 people doing the digital media division for the newspaper called Clarín. That I would say was one of the, because of the huge middle class and everything, I would say it was one of the top newspapers in the world in terms of distribution, because it was 1 million subscribers, is a lot in paper. So they were indeed sponsors of the Media Lab. That's why we had access to Polsafo, to many of the Media Labs. And that was like also nurturing our mindset. That was very interesting experience, because for the first year and a half we were like completely free. So they were like allowing us to experiment, to build. Indeed, we built the website not on request of the conglomerate or the corporation, but we did because that we had that free room, and we did a lot of things like real audio. Well, that was a streaming technology, like streaming audio every Sunday on like, that was 1996, 360 degrees pictures of the city, things that now are like also seen like maybe a little bit of futuristic things, but back then, like 25 years ago, wow.
Science fiction.
It was like science fiction. I did the first like web interface for a chat system, because back then you had to download the software and the protocol was very complex. So I did like a web interface. So it was all around like the experience, no, like building experience for the community. I was driven by that thought that the internet was going to create communities. I was not imagining Facebook. I was more theme-based communities, but that was my driving force back then. And also that would free people a lot, no, in terms of, so I have that idealistic mindset. So that experience, what gave me is this, and I saw the boom, I saw all these, irrational exuberance, then the bust, then the adjustment, where I realized that for the internet to really become what we expected in the early days, other things needed to happen, like, mobile devices were needed for that to happen. So that gave me like a maturity in terms of being part of an innovation technology cycle. Like, so when I went into crypto, I had that background, and that helped me a lot to be patient and to understand that we needed to develop the ecosystem and learn from it as it goes. So since the early days, I was telling people, this is not a sprint, this is a marathon. So we need to, like, stay in the game, if we want to really, capture the value of what we are building, if we really want to understand what we are doing. That's why when I started in Bitcoin, I was doing everything there was to it. I was meeting in cafes with people to buy and sell Bitcoins, because I wanted to know who was involved. And it was an amazing experience, like, meeting these strangers, like a retiree that didn't make enough money to properly retire, that was buying gold and Bitcoin with $25,000. And actually it was like a success case, because he managed to create like a retirement pot that was, sufficient for him to have a good retirement, and a lot of things like that. No, so I was also, the early day miners in Bitcoin were 3D gamers, because they had the GPUs already in their computers. So I was buying the Bitcoin sometimes from kids that were 3D gamers and were mining and didn't know what to do with the Bitcoins. Some of them sold me some of the rigs, so I was mining as well. That was 2012. I started doing the communities. The first meetup we co-organized with the other co-founders, Franco and Rodolfo from the Latin American Bitcoin community. We were 25, and the following one we were 100. And that was in the same time that we had capital controls in Argentina, so it was almost impossible to get money in and out of Argentina. The same time, the Cyprus bail-in, the bail-in happened, so also people got in Cyprus a similar experience to the one we had in Argentina like 12 years before in terms of getting their money locked. So that was in the news. We came from the 2008 collapse crisis, global crisis. So it was interesting because as we grew, indeed, all of the high-profile projects that you see in Latin America, or most of them, come from that early days community, the 2013 early days community. So I think that was like a good bet in terms of like thinking on a community way of building, not on a business. Indeed, until the end of 2013, I didn't have clarity yet on where I wanted to focus myself. Then I said, okay, financial inclusion is what I want to tackle, and then I started to like move my efforts in that direction. And you know, together with some volunteers, we started in the following year to go to the slums and do some experiments. You know, so you know. I would say the connection between the two is that, you know, the first wave of innovation gave me like the proper perspective to understand the second wave and being able to capitalize on that process and learn and be more patient and have a proper understanding of what's going on as it was going on, you know? Which the first time I could not understand properly. You know?
And so from that inception, you created the RSK and all these areas. So can you tell us about the inception, because it's quite a powerful platform, and as well, how did you come up with that? How do you start with your entrepreneurial platforms that are right now global platforms? Yes. As well?
Well, at the end of 2013, I founded Koibanx, with the aim of creating platforms using the Bitcoin technology. Back then, there was only Bitcoin. There was no blockchain. No, the blockchain concept came very later on. But I was already thinking on Bitcoin as a platform, not only as a currency. So in my thinking was how we create financial platforms that would like democratize access to finance, or even help governments in have a more transparent way of managing their programs. So we started with Koibanx going in that direction, like setting up like different attempts or different experiments to build platforms. At the same time, I was doing this voluntary work on the slums, and we were inviting social entrepreneurs to the meetups, and they were selling dumplings, for example, for Bitcoin, and we were converting the Bitcoin for them in pesos. And it was like a whole learning experience for us. And then I realized that if we wanted to solve those problems in general, Bitcoin needed to extend and be more. That only Bitcoin as a store of value was not enough for solving the financial inclusion problem. And I was with these thoughts, and I was doing a fundraising trip in the Silicon Valley at the end of 2014. And a friend of mine did like a surprise meeting with Nick Szabo, because he didn't tell me, and we were going to meet with Nick Szabo. And Nick he came to visit us because he wanted to understand what was going on in Latin America with my efforts in Latin America. No? So he was asking me, okay, how is the Bitcoin movement in Latin America? What is your thoughts, and what are your thoughts? And then I told him, in Latin America, we have 50% of the population that is underserved or not served by the traditional financial system. And I think of Bitcoin like this new financial system that will be inclusive, but I think we need to extend Bitcoin. And then in that conversation, Sergio Lerner's name appeared. Sergio was the first one to create a Turing complete cryptocurrency at the beginning of 2013. He's also Argentinian. In May 2013, he created Quixcoin, then was renamed as Nimblecoin. So from that conversation, I reached out to Sergio, or all of us reached out to Sergio and told him, Sergio, if you want to join forces, you have our support. Why don't we extend Bitcoin to be to have agreements, or have Turing complete is a way of saying general purpose programming language. So we could have Bitcoin extended so it could support any kind of agreement, not only transfers and store of value, but also more complex agreements. I was focused on basically was creating what is now known as a stablecoin, was a peso backed by Bitcoin, because I didn't want the monetary system to depend on third parties. I didn't want to have counterparty risk. So the first model I wanted to do is like a peso that was kind of going back to the gold standard, but with a smart contract, with a program and a network that was protecting that contract. That's what later the MakerDAO project and now the Money on Chain projects ended up doing. So that was my original idea when we started talking with Sergio, and then I knew his team. That also became partners of RSK. He told me, you know what, doing only this or doing a general purpose thing is the same effort. Why don't we go for the full thing? So we were for a few months, because Sergio was already working on Nimblecoin, I was already working on Koibanx with my partner. And so after a few months, we say, okay, let's join forces. And that's when RSK came with the idea of extending Bitcoin into a full financial system, so that we could manage any asset, any kind of agreements, complex agreements between people. And that's at the end of 2015 is when we released the white paper privately. Well, Nick Szabo got excited and he tweeted about it. So we didn't want to be in the open yet, but that forced us to start the fundraising and started to actually take it more serious, because until then we were funding the developers ourselves. We were testing the idea. We didn't want to go out, but that forced us to go into the wild, into the open, and that's when at the beginning of 2016 this project started. And also at the end of 2015, I started conceptualizing this idea of the Internet of Value that was mentioned also, but I didn't know back then by the Ripple team. There was 1-2 people that were also at the same time talking about it, but conceptualizing that what we were building was a network of networks for the transfer and store of value. So this new concept of, we had already Internet of Information, now we have the Internet of Value. And I started building a conceptual model where I was layering or creating a layered approach where the bottom layer was the store of value layer. Then you had the agreements layer on top of that. Then you had a peer-to-peer services layer using the agreements layer as a settlement layer for agreements. And then you have the application layer on top of that. And, that was the vision that was driving us since then, this idea of the financial inclusion, achieving financial inclusion by building the Internet of Value, by building this open network of networks for the store and transfer of value and for economical agreements among people. And since then, we have been achieving the goals, building the stack, one by one. RSK was launched in 2018, the January 2018, with 5% of the hashing power of Bitcoin, because it's built in a way where miners of Bitcoin protect both RSK and Bitcoin at the same time. So it's fully integrated with the Bitcoin ecosystem. And, at the moment we have around 40%, we reached 69% of the hashing power of Bitcoin. So RSK became the safest smart contract blockchain network after Bitcoin. No? So it has been evolving, and we kept building the protocols on top of that. No? The peer-to-peer infrastructure protocols. So we keep moving in that direction. No?
So from Koibanx and then RSK that was as well known as Rootstock and the code name Rootstock, and then for IOVlabs. Can you tell us the evolution of the three projects, and as well how you are involved in other projects, but just on these specific projects?
Well, Koibanx, when I moved to lead RSK, Koibanx had a new leadership, so it kept going as a solution providers, and it indeed is one of the integration partners of the RSK ecosystem. They are doing very interesting work with the banks, for example, some of the top banks in Latin America, like integrating this technology in financial corporations. So they kept with the original vision of being a solution provider for these technologies, while we with the team, the RSK team, keep building the infrastructure underneath. No, so the Koibanx was on the upper layers of this Internet of Value stack. So they kept building that, and they have been very successful in that space. And RSK keep building the infrastructure layers. And at one point, we decided to do a spin-off that was RIF, the RSK Infrastructure Framework. So I started with that spin-off in mid-2017, and that was launched at the end of 2018, like almost a year after, or 6-7 months after RSK was launched in production. And when we saw the dynamics, we decided that it made sense to have like one organization pushing the full stack, the full technological stack. So that's when IOVlabs came. We merged both teams, and the Internet of Value Labs, that is the organization I'm leading now, became a reality. So IOV integrated the RIF team and the RSK teams into one, because we thought that the synergies between the full technologies made more sense to be pushed. And also because IOVlabs is a purpose-driven organization that is also helping the adoption and creating the conditions for people to build solutions on top of this ecosystem. No? So we have, and with the purpose of eventually serving 1 billion people excluded in our society or underserved, financially underserved in our society. But we understand that dream or that vision is so big that cannot be achieved by a single organization. It needs to be built in an ecosystem. So that's why what we are doing is like building the foundations and promoting the growth of an ecosystem that will serve that people that today is excluded. No?
And from this work, which is fantastic in terms of building all these infrastructure layers of solutions that are critical to make the blockchain technology as we know it, and as well even Bitcoin being scalable in terms of users. What would be the, let's say, from an highlight about what you achieved so far, what would be like the benchmarks that you would like to highlight for our audience? Because I think it's not everyone knows unless you are more into the technology at core. So it'd be interesting to hear that part.
Well, as I said, RSK became the second safest blockchain network in the world after Bitcoin. So I think that's a pretty impressive achievement. Yes, it's not our end game because we want security for another purpose, but it's important to have, and that was the original vision of RSK. If we want to create a financial inclusion platform, how we make that financial inclusion platform be the safest possible. And that's why we choose Bitcoin as an infrastructure to secure. So that part of the vision is becoming a reality. That's one thing. And then we have built a big part of a peer-to-peer infrastructure. It's a system that in the following months will be seen in action, because the other thing we did is we acquired a social network, Taringa. That is a Spanish speaking social network that has 30 million registered users last year, and we have been in the process of integrating all these technologies to decentralize or turn the social network into a purely peer-to-peer social network. On the community side, so the community will moderate and run the community aspects. On the economic side, that last week we launched the first part of the sharing economy. So now the the content producers, the people who interact with the network is also rewarded with the profit of the network, of the social network, and on the infrastructure side. So the users will be able to run the infrastructure, to serve the content. So it's a purely peer-to-peer internet, if you will, or yes. So that will be the showcase that we are doing. And within that environment, we are also integrating open finance solutions. One thing that is also a milestone is that last year, Money on Chain launched the first dollar asset backed by Bitcoin. So that original vision I had of like having stable assets or the local currencies, represented but backed by Bitcoin, backed by a digital gold, also happen, and that's already active. And that's very interesting because you are having an asset that follows the dollar value, but is backed fully by a decentralized system, a smart contract. So you are not relying on third parties. You can exchange your stable asset, your dollar, digital dollar, for Bitcoin at any time and back. No? So you can provide your Bitcoins and get a dollar. So actually on top of that, what we are seeing now is that people is starting to build other solutions like lending solutions, payment solutions. So this vision of a truly open financial system is becoming a reality. And some people is integrating, for example, with the banking system of some countries like Argentina, Mexico, Spain. So you are seeing how this new financial infrastructure is starting to get connected to the traditional financial institution, the infrastructure, and you're starting to see building services. So I would say those are the milestones at the moment, but I think when we are in a point where during next year, we'll see the full realization of the original vision of how this infrastructure will create an inclusive financial system.
And that's amazing. So one thing that I want to touch, so you have in one end the infrastructure technology and the layers of technology and the smart contract and the stability, which is one of the leading ones in the world and after Bitcoin. Then you have the integration right now with the social network, which has a substantial number of users, which makes you a big platform worldwide. And then you are as well bridging with financial institutions. I know you were one of the first ones doing a pilot with the Central Bank of Argentina. That's and correct. A lot of things. So that's kind of a lot of amazing things you're doing. So can you just look at these three things? Because I think very few people know about this. So it's actually, congratulations, first of all, but it's important to highlight that as well, even because when you talk to blockchain and crypto, there's as well, you have a very moderated part, which I love. I'm part of that because a lot of people, okay, we're going to destroy everything and create everything from scratch. Come on, let's be realistic. And we have enough problems. But yeah, I would like to hear your visions on these three layers.
Well, I think it's like, I think many things are happening at the same time. No? So it's on one side, we need to build an infrastructure that is open. But at the same time, if that financial infrastructure wants to service 1 billion people, that infrastructure and the 1 billion people excluded, you need to understand why people is excluded from the financial system. So one thing is like fixed cost. People who is excluded, mostly they don't have the predictability in their lives to say, I can pay monthly on monthly basis. So it needs to be a system that is paid on demand. That is by nature the design of blockchain systems. Blockchain systems, once you register your account, you don't have to pay unless you use it. But on the other side, if you remove that, like on the traditional financial system, they have to have like fixed costs in terms of security, insurance, a lot of things that, demand for the traditional model, they demand, to have a fixed recurrent fee on the customers. It's not possible to just do it on demand. So that's one thing. The other thing is that operational costs need to be very low and that you need to scale, because let's say that PayPal today processes 190 transactions per second, Visa on average 3,000, on the peak, on Christmas they do 24,000, Alipay on the peak will do 85,000. So you need 85,000 transactions per second. So you need to be able to scale these to those levels. Blockchain by design if you want to keep it decentralized, that's another thing. We keep the ethos of decentralization of Bitcoin. So we always keep our systems run, or our core systems run in a way that anybody can download the software and validate the functioning of the system independently. They don't need to rely on third parties to know if a transaction was processed or not. And that's very important because that gives transparency and reliability to the ecosystem and make it truly peer-to-peer. So we keep that, and with those constraints, we think our blockchains can scale. They can do 100 transactions per second now, maybe half of PayPal. But to do it that sustainably, we can do a lot of improvements. We have already on our roadmap that will take us maybe to 2,000 transactions per second. But that's still not on par with the big processing system. So that's when the layer 3, these peer-to-peer infrastructure services, come into place. Those systems use the agreements layer only to settle disputes. They don't operate on the blockchain layer all the time. They operate on a peer-to-peer fashion. As long as everybody fulfills its promises, you don't need to go to the blockchain. So you use the blockchain only when the agreement is not fulfilled. And that enables you to scale in the current technological state. It enables to scale maybe 50 times whatever you have on the underlying layer. So even without further improvements on that upper layer, we are in a position where we will be able to provide services for billions of users. But not only that, these peer-to-peer layers are much like 50 times less expensive or 20 times less expensive than the blockchain layer. So let's say that in Bitcoin, the cost of transaction is 25 cents, 50 cents per transaction. In RSK is 1 to 5 cents, depending on the type of transaction. In this upper layer is a fraction of a cent. So suddenly you have a system that is not only doesn't have recurrent cost, but also the transactional cost is very, very accessible. So that's the other thing. And finally, the third reason why people is excluded is because the traditional risk assessment models are based on assets, on how many assets you have. If you have a car, if you have a house, if you have a formal paycheck. Those are the things that people excluded in society don't have. But what every human being has is a reputation. So the third layer is also providing reputational identity models that are open and portable. So that's what we are trying to validate on the social network, like create reputational models that over time create enough value for a person to access financial services, even if they don't have assets to put as collateral. So their reputation become the collateral to access to the financial services. So that's like the final key to enable. So we are solving all those things. At the same time, going to the corporate side and government side, I don't think it's possible. All the value in the world is on the traditional financial system. So it's impossible to think that we will serve and really serve like in an integrated way, in a meaningful way to those excluded in our society if we don't create bridges to the traditional infrastructure. So that's why for us it's so important to work with governments, with corporations, to also show them how this technology can also help them. And how this technology can improve transparency, efficiency in their processes, so they can collaborate in this transformational process. And the transfer of value will happen in a period of time, maybe 10 years, 15 years, where the technology will evolve, the usage of this new infrastructure will become more and more relevant until this alternative infrastructure become the mainstream infrastructure. But that's a process. So we need to think that in that process, traditional organizations are providers of trust and are needed for doing that transformation of the financial system into a more, egalitarian financial system and an open financial system that will serve the whole humanity and not a fraction of it. But we need that collaboration. That's why we think we work on all the dimensions with different priorities, of course. No, we keep always a focus on the people we want to serve, but without disregarding that you need to have in account the full picture.
So you touch a lot of things that are massive importance in both the global economy and global society. So one is definitely identity. And I think identity is right now probably the most
Yes.
sensitive and most important thing, and that's why I know that you bought the social network. So one of the things I would like to argue on that, because at the end of the day, so far the blockchain revolution has been somehow bringing a success into the supply chain, into the financial transactions, and a bit in some ways of the areas of probably registration of properties or registration of some more things. But when it comes to identity, we are going through a big challenge that is not just about the blockchain technology. It's a much bigger challenge. At the moment, we have a global economy that is completely unbalanced. For instance, I know that Argentina is going through a lot of challenge, but just look at the US, where most of the numbers we're talking right now about 30 to 40 million people that are getting into extreme poverty because of COVID-19. And then worldwide, we're talking about 200 million people that right now were affected to go back to poverty worldwide because of COVID-19. And I'm not talking about the 1.7 or 2 billion people that don't even have some kind of financial integration. So one of the things that I would like to ask you, someone that has been working both in the technology layers, now in the smart contract and in Bitcoin and as well in the blockchain, is we have enough technology weapons and tools, let's put it tools, I think is better than weapons, to solve a lot of the problems, but we are right now completely dependent of platforms like Facebook. For instance, an example that I want to give is, so for instance, if you look at Amazon, for instance, Amazon is right now the most profitable, or at least the biggest, most valuable company in the world, together with Apple, Google, and Microsoft at a certain point. All these companies are data companies and identity companies, by all means, because they have identity of business and people. And at the moment, for instance, Amazon, Jeff Bezos did $12 billion last week in one day because of the shares of Amazon. But I want to come back to the blockchain. So we're talking about that one person. So Amazon only controls around 7% of the sales and the e-commerce in the US, and it's still the most valuable company in the planet, at least in terms of this. So how do you see this kind of layer of decentralized technology is solving these problems? Because in the end of the day, all of these organizations are completely centralized, monopolies. And at the same time, actually, for instance, if you look at the business model of Facebook, Google, and Amazon, they're becoming very perverse in the sense that they destroy entire ecosystems. And no one actually is making business, let's be honest, because at the moment, what we're seeing is that we people like us, we're privileged, but most of the people are struggling and they don't even understand. They all use the tools nevertheless. So yeah, I just want to, it's a bit provocative and a bit more like big picture.
No, I like that you bring, I mean, you know, as we touch so broad topics, sometimes I leave some topics out, but this is a topic that for me is very important. There is a paper from Coes from 1940 that is called The Nature of the Firm, where he analyzes why corporations are needed. I mean, what's the value? Because everything that exists, things are not created out of evil. They are created out of necessity or because they enable something new, and then they get perverted. It's like the perversion is the aftermath, not the original. So corporations were a means to lower the cost of association. Is basically, if I need to engage with somebody per job or per project, it's very costly. So instead of that, what I do is I make like a long-term contract. That's employment. Like I say, okay, we do this umbrella contract between the organization and you, so we can like rely on each other, and that will keep us aligned in the mid-term or long-term. And that's where I think, an evolution of that is the reputational model. Reputational models enable you, and that's what the peer-to-peer, which are not, or sharing economies, are doing, is basically you use reputational models to lower the cost of association. The problem is that the initial sharing economies, like the ones you mentioned, because at the end, Amazon is a sharing economy. It's using the reputation of sellers and the reputation of buyers to enhance or lower the cost of association of those people. The problem is that the sponsors of these sharing economies kept the reputational information in their hands. The same that Facebook did, the same that Airbnb and Uber are doing, is like, they are not only creating the environments for these sharing economies and for these fast engagement models to occur, these sharing economies, but the problem is they are keeping the data, as you say, in silos. So they build these walled gardens around reputation. So I'm, as a user of these sharing economies, don't have the right to take my reputational information and take it somewhere else to get another service or to engage with somebody else in another network. And that is, for me, again, this is a revolutionary process, but that's where the reputational identity we are building is a reputational model where people is in command of their data, and that we are putting that into work in the social network first. But these are open technology, so the idea is that others will take the same thing. The first thing we are implementing is a single sign-on, like the one that Facebook and Google offer you to log into websites, but in the hands of the user. So in the case of Taringa, a single sign-on that they will use is not going to be controlled by Taringa, but the users will be able to revoke access to any website at any time. So first thing is that one. And then on top of that, we will be these reputational identities that we have the technology, but we will implement it. So people will keep a record of every interaction they have. So they will be in control of their reputation. Of course, if I'm the sponsor, I will also have a copy of the interactions that are attached to my environment, but no, I won't be able to avoid the user from keep and port the reputation somewhere else. So that for me is like providing the same low cost of association than traditional sharing economies, but providing the openness is the key to transform the situation you're because if we don't provide exactly the same quality of service and that traditional systems, centralized systems offer, then there's no point, because you need to provide the same value without the downside. It's the only way you can replace one model with the following one.
Completely. So I want to touch that part, because I think that is the biggest challenge of the blockchain technology and all the decentralized models. Because in the end of the day, so first of all, you have a platform that is a social network with 15, I think it's 15 million people that you mentioned.
13,
which is quite impressive.
No, sorry, 30,
30, which it's super impressive. It's one of the biggest in the world. So you can actually scale and make it much bigger, because that's, I think, what is missing right now. Because if you look at, like you said, it's not the blame of Facebook of the success they have. They create a lot of value for people. It's more about right now, of course, the monopoly they created. It created a problem because it's no longer creating value right now. It's creating a lot of issues. It still creates some value, but it's creating more issues than value, especially in a lot of other sensitive areas. But my challenge from a technology layer, so let's say when the internet started, it was as well open source technology, which you can say that is decentralized, but then it became completely subverted by the biggest players that actually led the innovation, and especially Silicon Valley venture capital. So with the iteration of crypto, especially with the ICOs, for instance, your ICO was funded by decentralized funding, which is crowdfunding, digital based in smart contracts. And as well, you have all these layers right now that you're trying to make forward. So how do you think we can actually, and I think we touched, and I'm going a bit macro, big picture, but I want to touch that because I know that you're touching that in your work, is, let's say, Argentina is an interesting case study that the society, or not the society, the political powers had failed the society, and the society had kind of to create a decentralized way of solving problems for themselves, like a parallel economy, and they're using innovation solutions. But at the moment, they still are using the Facebooks and all these big platforms, all of them. So the challenge is that this is the same that happened all over the world, that we have all these 2 billion people that are under the radar of financial institutions, or financially excluded, that, as we call it. But as well on that, we have 300 million people that are in extreme poverty. So how do you see this, especially you, someone that you grew up looking and from a family background, going to the most difficult areas of Argentina, and as well having a very social impact driven solution? How can we look at the layers of technology and as well the layers of society and work it together? Because this is a very complex problem. And I know that you're working on that. That very few people can talk about this, especially technologists.
Yeah, I think, the only way is to understand, we line up our technology behind user needs. So it's like, that's something I learned on the web. Like, I was evangelizing about the web for years, like explaining one-to-one or sometimes in groups to people the potential of the web. And really my contributions were, I would say, meaningless compared to what, I don't know, having Hotmail did. I mean, once you provide a solution for people that will solve a problem they have, in the case of Hotmail, is having better communications with somebody abroad or somebody, not necessarily abroad, but having more fluid communications with others. Suddenly, you don't need to explain the technology. It doesn't mind. It doesn't care. I mean, the people doesn't care what technology is behind. They understand what's the usefulness of that tool for them. So the focus should be there on saying, okay, that's why I think financial inclusion also is a big driver for adoption of the cryptocurrencies, because you are targeting people who today has no service. So for them, accessing financial services is an exponential change in their lives. For you and me, okay, like having another financial system is like, it might be an improvement, but it's an incremental improvement. It's not an exponential or transformational. So we need to focus on those places where these technologies can provide like exponential value or a differential value that has not been seen, because then adoption comes after that. It's not because of the technology that people adopt things. It's because the technology improves their lives, or not even the technology, the solutions improves their lives, the applications improves their lives, is that people adopt. And then the technology is an afterthought, is the consequence of supporting a certain use case, but not. I think, like with any new technology, we have been putting blockchain and crypto in the front, and it should be put back on the back again. No, it's like we should put the use cases, and that's why I think understanding financial inclusion and how these technologies can solve the problem of financial inclusion, or for example, people is working on community currencies, which is also another way of empowering communities, and I think those are the things that really will make this technology mainstream, that we find problems that people has. Of course, store of value, like having a digital gold accessible, like is Bitcoin, in a moment of crisis, is something very relevant, and people will have it. But that's only 1/3 of the population at most that can store value for a long period of time, or at least 1 year. 2/3 of the population don't have that privilege of storing value for more more than a week or a month. So it's like so that's very specific use cases. Valuable one, I think Bitcoin is the foundations of all the things we are building, but still we need to be conscious that we need. I mean, there are 2/3 of the population that have different needs, and we need to tailor the solutions for that part of the population.
No, I'm completely with you. That's very good points, and I think it's really the critical element, especially when it comes to, because technology has to serve people. And to be honest, to be fair to Facebook, their success was that they misappropriate all the technologies and synthesize it in a simple way. So
yes, and provided ways of people to
use it,
connect, to build communities, connect with the family, a lot of good things,
Completely. So in terms of the work you're doing right now, and I know that you're doing a lot of stuff, especially with Taringa, and as well with scaling the technology, and next year you expect to have much more. So how you see this roadmap right now from where you are to the next level? Because I think that's quite an ambitious way, and of course 40 million people is already a huge ecosystem that you have there to test and to do things.
I mean, our end goal of being is like, or our long-term horizon is like 5 to 7 years, maybe 6 years. But before that is like the end game of like having an ecosystem that is serving hundreds of millions or hopefully 1 billion people. But in order to do that, like anything that wants to go exponential first has to validate the value proposition. That was the previous point. So now we are at the point where we are validating the value proposition and validating certain scaling restraints. No, so that's why we said, okay, we want an active social network that has 30 million registered users, that has 500,000 unique visitors per day. So you have the eyeballs, you have the context to test these technologies not in the final scale, but in a scale that is big enough to solve most of the problems. So that will give us a good grasp. So that's our first point. It's like validating the scaling or scaling problems that we might find in the longer road, validate the value proposition, see how these sharing economies, portable reputation works. That's why we are working in parallel on the Taringa integration and on the open finance that in other ecosystems is the finance DeFi, decentralized finance. But we like more the open finance concept because for us it's about open finance solutions more than decentralization is a tool to ensure openness and to protect, not the final goal. So decentralization for us is a tool, not the goal is the openness, and we use decentralization as a way to ensure that. So our focus is on validating this value proposition on both sides, the open finance solutions and testing this in a scale that is meaningful. Once we have that, then the following step is take that to a certain level of users or a user base that creates network effect. Once you have that, the network effect takes care of the following steps. So it's like if you look at all the exponential organizations, they usually have like a linear growth until they are 50, 80 million users, and then the network effects kick in and then they go exponential. So for now, our focus is on the value proposition validation, on testing certain scaling constraints or problems. And in the midterm, that's when we plan to start the blitz scaling or exponential growth once we have the validation properly settled. Because when you go exponential, there's no time to fix anything. It's like you need to have like the full circuit, like very, very oil and well.
So completely, and I'm 200% with you. So coming back to Taringa, because I think that's quite impressive, the fact that you have the platform, okay, Inteligencia Colectiva, like you said
yes.
in Spanish. So can you tell us a bit about Taringa? Because I think people don't understand how big this is. And I think sometimes in the Western world, well, 30 million people is already a mainstream. And for instance, we have right now Revolut that is worth, I don't know, $5 or $6 billion, and I think they have like 10 million users. So what you have here is quite impressive as well. So just to understand what you built here.
I think that Taringa, it's interesting because Taringa was one of the early organizations. Taringa has 15 years of existence. So, and Taringa built extremely successful. Taringa in the peak had 70 million unique visitors per month. That was the traffic that Taringa had. But then what happened is that they were challenged because people was sharing files and sharing content, and then they were challenged. They went to trial for that, and they won. So they actually on a legal level they won. But then the big corporations or organizations that were managing their advertisement and the ad networks, the main ad networks, told them, if you don't remove this functionality from the community, then I take you out of the business. And that's a little bit of what you were saying before, no? That there are certain monopolies that have the power to take you off, destroy full ecosystems if they don't like how you do business, and so then Taringa had to remove some of the core features of the community, of what the community was valuing, and that's when they reduced their audience or traffic to 1/7 of the original level. So that's where we got them, where they were tied up. They had they still had this vision of being a community-driven social network. They had these 30 millions. One thing is Taringa has very positive emotional attachment. Like you talk in all Latin America, in Spain, and people, the taringueros, how they call it, they love Taringa. They have very good feelings about it, very good memories. But the network, the social network, was restrained by this context. So our hope is to give new life to Taringa and to turn a social network into a social marketplace where the social or community activity and the economic activity are all part of the same thing. So that's what we are starting to deploy. Where we deployed last week the Taringa Club, that is basically the first part of this social network, the sharing economy within. But with the idea that with the same engine, others will be able to create their own sharing economy. So this is conceptually what we are doing is also building Taringa in a way where it will become a platform, a protocol, an open protocol, where others will be able to create. So Taringa is just a success case or a demonstration use case of the potential. But the idea is that somebody that already has a good community in India, but is restrained by these same problems, can build around successful community using all the infrastructure, all the open source peer-to-peer infrastructure we are building for Taringa. So so it's interesting because Taringa has a long tradition. The brand awareness in all the region is huge. That's why we choose it, and very positive. It's a positive and widespread brand awareness.
So one question. So if you look at blockchain, coming back to blockchain and crypto, the only really social network that somehow had some success was Steemit.
It's Steemit, yes.
So how do you see the difference or integrations? Do you want to reward the users for their data? You mentioned about identity as well, because Steemit never really passed through the crypto core closed community. Whereas you have a platform in one end that was massive, and right now you're actually bringing tools.
Yes,
yeah.
And that's the difference. I think Steemit was born out from the crypto community, and Taringa is the other way around. It's a community of its own, and what we are doing is bringing crypto into them, but we are not imposing it. That's the main thing. It's like we are seeing where crypto it's interesting for the community. So what we are doing is the other way around. For the Taringa team, the user is the driver, not crypto. So they are like understanding which tools. That's why they are choosing on the roadmap which things are meaningful for the community, not the other way around. So that's why the single sign-in, for example, single sign-on system, they detected that would be very interesting, and they already have been talking with other publishers on the web that are interested in integrating that. So they saw certain places where this is valuable for the community. So we are working from the community first perspective. So it's the community driving the development of the technology, not the other way around.
Yeah, that's impressive. And as well, I think that's the way to go, because you cannot build a platform without thinking about the users. And I think that a lot of the failures is about people focus more on the crypto than actually creating value proposition.
Yes.
So that brings me to, and we passed already 1 hour, but if you have still a little bit of time, I still have a couple of questions that I want, and we'll wrap up in a while. So one of the questions that is key for me is coming back to, of course, Taringa is part of that question, but so if you look at South America in particular, in Argentina, you have a massive adoption, both of creators of blockchain solutions, crypto adoption, and as well a lot of innovation over there. We touched that, but I would like to go a bit more. How do you see this at the moment? And I know that there's a lot of cases like you and your companies, which are all based in Argentina, but a lot of people even some of the beginning developers of blockchain and Bitcoin actually were Argentina as well. So there's a lot of and you touched one of them, but there's a couple of them. So what's this stage right now in the crypto and blockchain context in Latin America, especially in Argentina? How do you see that?
Well, I think Latin America, for many reasons, is a Bitcoiner region. Because in complementing what I was saying before, Bitcoin is only for it's only useful on the extremes, or you either are on the 1/3 of the population that can store value for long periods of time, or you are on the part of the population that is subject to economies or macroeconomic situations of huge instability. And that's the case of Argentina. Venezuela is an extreme case. So even in those contexts, even for people who is not being able to store value in the long term, Bitcoin is better an alternative than what they have in their countries, because it's like it's already the instability of the local currencies is worse than the instability is much. So that's interesting that you have those extremes. So that's why in Latin America, you don't have to explain people why Bitcoin is relevant. They get it right out of the gates. They see it. And so on one side, you have that fertile ground. Then you have half of the population that is excluded or underserved. So that need is already there as well. That doesn't happen in Europe or the US, although now with the new situation, more and more part of the populations will need these kind of solutions. But basically, you have the fertile ground for that. And in Argentina, although we are no longer based on Argentina, we grew out of Argentina, but again, we internationalized, and again, it was difficult to keep building in Argentina, so now we are all over the place. But you have a lot of talent in Argentina, and that's what, like, also you can use that talent. You have some, not only RSK, also, for example, part of the Cardano development is being done in Argentina. Ethereum Classic also had contributions from teams. The EOS and BitShares had some of the core developers in Argentina. So it's very interesting that, well, the Ethereum ecosystem as well, the Open Zeppelin team is from Argentina. So you have some of the top development teams in all the main crypto platforms. You have some core developers of Bitcoin as well in Argentina. So it's very interesting that Argentina per se is like a hub of knowledge and technology. It's not only like adoption, but no, I mean, when I started with the community, the Bitcoin community back in 2013 or the end of 2012, my objective was to use these technologies to free the potential that Latin America has. Latin America is a rich continent, but has been so fragmented, and I think sometimes intentionally politically attacked or fragmented, that is like always living on a situation of instability, always in a precarization environment. And I think my hopes were that if we could build with these technologies a network interconnecting Latin America on a different level, on a layer that was not politicized or was not politically influenced, we could give entrepreneurs in Latin America the opportunity to thrive and to show their true potential. Because this human value is there. I mean, the knowledge, the creativity, the entrepreneurship, that's there, and I wanted to create better conditions for entrepreneurs all over the region, and that's happening already in some way in the crypto community that we build. That you're starting to see the entrepreneurs in our community grow, interconnect, start doing business together. That's how it's happening more and more. When I started, we had like a few hundred members in the community. Now we have multiple tens of thousands of members in the community, and keeps growing. So I think the seeds are there, and I think when the pieces fall in place, we will see something interesting in the region.
So, and this brings me to another question, and I think the last two questions. So in terms of COVID-19, of course, things are going through a massive challenge. I know that especially Brazil is a mess, and the United States is a mess as well. So how do you envision, one thing that came out of this, and you touched that is key for the work you're doing, is the digital transformation of both the users, the institutions, and everything else. So, of course, COVID-19 is accelerating this, whatever you like it or not. And to be honest, there's one thing that people, I think, especially the media, don't touch that, because the media is about Trump and the negativity that happened. But I think it's that we're still talking here in Zoom. You are in Argentina with a perfect connection. I'm actually at the moment traveling in Portugal, and our team is all over the world. So I think, and our team. So how do you see this kind of COVID-19 as a way to redesign our society, looking at the positive of it, but as well with the challenge that come out of it as well? So how do you see that part? Because especially when it comes to the idea of society 5.0 or fourth industrial revolution and digital transformation.
Well, I think on one side, our societies were designed after efficiency, like the maximum driver or the top driver of our societies. And that drove to design decisions in terms of, when you want efficiency, centralized systems are the most efficient. So that turns into centralization by design. It's like when you and what we have when we have this existential crisis is we realize that efficiency is not enough because the supply chains empty very soon and you don't have any slack or any redundancy in place. You see that you are producing certain things in a singular place, so there's no anti-fragility or resiliency to these systems. So I think as a society we need to change that driver for the driver of sustainability. So because when you put sustainability in place, it's not only efficiency, and then you make other you take design patterns that are tailored to that objective. So one thing is that centralization, and we see that with the leaders that this is very clear. The leaders that understood properly the consequences and exponentiality of the COVID pandemic acted swiftly, and their societies are good. The ones that didn't understood it, they didn't act and they disregard the phenomenon, have societies that are suffering a lot. So centralization is not using the collective intelligence. So we need to, but when you think about sustainability, you by design use the collective intelligence, by design have redundant systems, by design decentralized decision making, because that's faster to act on the edge. So I think in that sense, all the things we are building are in tune with that new model of thinking that hopefully will emerge. Otherwise, I think we will have other macro crises or existential crises that might be even worse for humanity. Some indeed we were avoiding, that was the climate change and the environmental crisis. We were not actually acting on it. And it's because of the same problems, because it was not aligned with efficiency or consumption, so it was not the driver. It was not aligned with the drivers of society. So we have to rethink what are the drivers of society, and that will, create change in the architecture. So in that sense, I think the technology we are providing is an excellent technology to potentiate those distributed models, collective intelligence models. On the other side, as you said, I agree with you 100%. This is, making digitalization of money and of everything, of interactions, taking this to the next level. But how we do that is very important, because if you digitalize money in centralized systems, then what you have is mass surveillance systems. You are like giving away privacy for good. So, and crypto also has a great balance to provide the means to have privacy while you can enforce, society rules. Because in the case of Bitcoin, it's very clear. Bitcoin is not anonymous, it's pseudonymous. So you cannot do mass surveillance of the population, but if a crime is committed, you can have a forensic, expert do the trail, follow the trail, and connect at some point, maybe in the future, with an identified party, and then find the culprit or the criminal activity source. So it's a good balance. Is you're not being able to monitor the population in real time, but if something that attacks the society values happens, you have the tools to, with effort, do like a directed, analysis. So that's the balance that crypto provides. And the same thing is because there's no way to avoiding, if you are targeted by a hacker or an intelligence group or wherever, there's no technology that can protect you from that. We are not trying to avoid that. What we are trying to make is very difficult to do mass surveillance and monitor the whole population or the population as a whole. So in that sense, that should be the objective, to protect privacy to a level that doing mass surveillance or mass monitoring of the population is impossible. But, case by case or individual monitoring, I say is, from a pragmatic way is unstoppable. So our objective should be on protecting privacy of the collective, not necessarily of the individuals. So that's, and I think crypto provides a solution for that. So we have money that is maybe not as anonymous as paper, but still good enough, so we protect privacy. And the other things we were talking about, reputational models, that's ages from what we have today, because now all our reputational information is in the hands of a few organizations, and we see that information being leaked over and over again, and will happen more and more, because the more digital we become, the more those leakage, the more the hacking will happen. So I think in that sense is key what we are doing. The fight for privacy, I was saying that was the fight for the next decade. I didn't expect it to happen so soon, but now it's like it's right there. Depending on what we do in the next few years, it will depend how we will protect the freedom of individuals or not.
Yeah, that's a completely fantastic point to put it, and I think probably the most important point of our civilization, and as well our values. So as the last wrap up, and I would like to finish with this. So can you tell us about, so for the major RSK, IOVlabs, and as well the different works that you're working right now, can you just give us a bit of an overview about what's the present stage, what is the roadmap, what our audience can know about it, and as well where to find the information about the products? I think it's always important, especially some of the achievements. I think there's the websites, but it's important the achievements and even the thought leadership that you guys have that is quite impressive.
Well, I think I would say next year will be the year where we will settle the foundations of all the technology stack, and we'll have the first use cases in place. Some are already happening, but the first MVP of our vision in terms of the sharing economies, the social marketplace, and these sovereign identity and reputational models. So I think in the next year we'll see all the pieces falling in there. Also on the open finance, already some of the first integrations with the traditional infrastructure is happening. So look at the open finance systems, look closely to what the money on chain system is doing. If you go to rsk.co/DeFi, decentralized finance, you will find the different solutions that are being built. Taringa is taringa.net. That's great. For developers, we have a full website called developers.rsk.co, where you can see the full stack. That's interesting because you can see the full vision and how the different building blocks stack one on top of others. And if you are a developer, of course, you can use the libraries. We have released an open source wallet, the R wallet, that is for iOS and Android. So that's another important thing. We've seen developers waste a lot of time and resources on building the basics, and they don't keep enough resources for solving the business problem. So that's why we decided to create this open source wallet, so nobody has to build the wallet again. So they can just start focusing on the business. And that's our final, that we'll see realized in the next 6 months to 9 months. We want people to be able to come, for example, a fintech, to go from an idea to production ready in less than 1 month. That's our mindset, because that will bring a level of of competition and innovation to the space that was never seen before. So we are building all the elements. We are creating now some protocol changes that will enable any application developer to interact with the system like it was a traditional financial system. They won't have to know if there's Bitcoin underneath or wherever. They can have applications that run on a digital dollar, without anything else. So then the users with all these tools we are building will be able to create Venmo-like experiences, like without or Revolut experiences, without knowing how the technology works underneath. It's like we are creating abstraction level. So for now, I would say look at the use cases that are being developed. The Dexfreight is a huge logistics platform. The money on chain is building these stable assets backed by Bitcoin. They are releasing a decentralized exchange as well. And of course, look at the Taringa community, because that will be very, very interesting experiment and use case. So I think looking at the people using our technology is more interesting. If you are a developer, of course, you want to see the technology. But for regular people, the most interesting thing is downloading the wallet, playing around with it, interacting with it, and understanding, feeling the potential of how open finance and open social networks feel and react. No?
No, that's impressive. So, well, congratulations. I'm sure that in 1 year time we'll speak again, and hopefully
yes.
with a lot of success. Congratulations as well for all the achievements, both in terms of technology, but as well all the work of social impact and different things. Which I think it's key. I think we cannot forget that, because building technology, if it's not to serve us, we have a problem.
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
So thank you so much, Diego. It's been a big pleasure and a lot of ideas. Of course, we could talk for hours, but
yes.
step by step. we'll continue.
Great questions, and thank you for inviting me. It's a great pleasure.
My pleasure. Gracias.
Gracias.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Thank you.